Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another THRIVEcast. I am your host, DJ Eshelman, here with you once again from the studios here in Nashville. And unfortunately, Jeff Pitch, my co-host, could not be here today. He has a puppy emergency of the worst kind, the kind with violence involved. So we're hoping for the best for Jeff and his family as they try and navigate through this little mini crisis here. But we'll hopefully see from him next week. So a couple of housekeeping notes here. First of all, wanted to remind you that we have a calendar out there that has all of our broadcasts that are scheduled, not only for this THRIVEcast, but anything else we have coming up, which we hope to be adding some new things very soon here. So you can just go as a shortcut, you can put this into Outlook or whatever you're using for your calendar, thrive-it.com/ICS, and that will actually add the internet-based calendar for Thrive IT to your calendar. So that's kind of cool. So another thing is, feel free to say hi today. We'd love to hear from you. If you're watching with us live, we'll take any of your questions or do whatever. But note, there is about a 30-second delay from when you start typing and hit enter to the time that I see it on the screen, that sort of thing. So that's just because of the nature of streaming technology. So all I ask is that if you do have a question or a comment or anything like that, give me a little context. Little quips and conversational things are great, but we might have moved on since then. So things move pretty fast around here. So make sure you know that there's a delay on that. And but we do like hearing from you. We do like having your comments and questions. So feel free to do that. All right. So today we have with us an old friend of mine. I'm trying to remember exactly when I met Nick, but he has been the kind of a cornerstone of Citrix Consulting services for many years, and that's where him and I served together for a good many years. He's currently the Senior Director of Customer Success at Citrix, and if you ask really nicely, maybe we'll even get them to say what that actually means here soon. But anyway, I wanted to introduce my friend and today's guest, Nick Rintalan. How you doing, man?
Good. How's it going? Thanks for having me, DJ.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for being here. So before we get into exactly what a senior director of customer success does, maybe let's get into a little bit about kind of the beginning of your career. Like, what was your first IT experiences? What were those actually? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was, I think we were chatting offline, like a lot of people who go into IT, they usually start doing something else. And then they kind of, they stumble upon, Citrix and IT stuff. Right. But I don't know, for me, my love of computers started when I was, in middle school, high school, when computers were kind of really evolving at that time.
Yeah.
And I was just obsessed with like the horsepower within these things. And then, when I was really good at math and science, and I wasn't really good at everything else.
Gotcha.
So yeah, like I was maybe, I don't know, forced into this path. But when I was in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I thought I wanted to do this or that. And then computer science was, becoming a, kind of a major field. But computer engineering was brand new. And the school I chose for college was Tulane University down in New Orleans. And computer engineering had just been like accredited the year before I think I decided to, go there. It's basically a combination of double E and computer science. And so I was like, this is perfect. I thought I might want to do engineering because I like math and science. Computers, love those. I think that's where everything's going. Sold. So I got my master's there at Tulane in 5 years. And then kind of maybe the third year there in college, I started working for IBM, and I went right into software engineering. So a little bit more of CS stuff, but like for my master's and all that stuff, my senior thesis, I was studying artificial intelligence and machine learning and data mining and all that kind of fun stuff.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get to use a whole lot of it, which is sad, but yeah, it's funny now. Now at Citrix, we're getting into that field, with analytics and stuff like that, and Sappho acquisition. So that's kind of funny, 15 years later. But yeah, I worked for IBM doing software engineering for a couple of years, and then I went to Citrix and really started in kind of, Citrix Consulting and IT right away. So I didn't I'm not like, I guess, maybe a lot of the other stories we hear around here where, they went and did something in healthcare or finance, and then they discovered IT or stumbled into IT. I was kind of roped in from the beginning.
So like, this is your first job.
Pretty much. Yeah.
It's amazing.
I was at IBM for a year and a half, 2 years almost total. But Citrix was really my first job, like removed from the university, because I was moonlighting at Tulane with IBM, and so.
Okay. So how did you get from kind of that engineering kind of place to being in consulting? How did that journey happen?
Well, that was I was just at IBM. I mean, it's one of those jobs where, and I was with the software group, so it was more exciting and stuff. I mean, I getting to write code and stuff like that, but it was also pretty monotonous, pretty boring. I used to joke with my now wife, but the girlfriend at the time, like, the highlight of my day is going to lunch because I talk with another human. I get to order food.
Okay.
Because and you can, IBM Big Blue, it's one of those places you can go and retire. I mean, work there, retire 30 years later, and that's, bam, a career. And a lot of those guys do that, So I think it was just out of like, I thought I could maybe do something else with my skill set. I love people. I don't know. Yeah. Interacting, travel was something that was obviously interesting to me at the time because I was, young and dumb. And so that's why it came out. Like, I had a friend at Odelia Levy who sort of introduced me to Citrix. Yeah. And she's still at Citrix too. We're both here 17 years later. But she went into consulting and went to Tulane with me. And she was like, check out this Citrix thing. I'm doing this consulting stuff here, ProServe. It's really fun. You might like it. And then the rest is history. I joined. I just celebrated 16 years, last month. So pretty wild.
Cool stuff. So I think the other thing that's really key here, and this is something I want people to really hear on this, is that even though you had a path going, you had kind of a way you were going with it, you realized that you had a desire to interact with people. That you had this I don't know what to call it exactly, but a reference point of saying this is something I really like, and you made that part of your journey. And I think that's really important. People sometimes think that that's not something that's related in IT, and
no, and it was uncomfortable. I got to tell you, like moving from IBM and like that's a place you're set. Like, I'm telling you, I know IBM's changed, and there's all companies go through this. You could argue that, but I was pretty set. I was in the software group, which is really solid, and I found my place there. And I had a home, I think, for a long, long time. And it was super comfortable. But I had this inflection point where I was like, I think I just need to do something else, and I'm better than this. I think I don't know. And it was really, there's a fear there, and like kind of that healthy paranoia. But I was like, I'm gonna do it. Screw it. I'm gonna drop everything. Moved from Tampa, Florida at IBM to literally San Francisco, California, and join Citrix and start professional services. Like, I don't know. And it's fine. If you're passionate about something, it all works out. That's what I
exactly. Yeah. And realizing your passions is kind of crucial with that as well, of saying, well, gosh, if I just continue down this path, well, the saying goes, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got, right?
Yeah.
And so, recognize that there's something else there. So, cool. So, tell us more about the consulting journey. Like, how did that? Obviously, that kind of solidified. So, how did that get to being kind of defining who you were at Citrix?
Yeah, I think because and so I started out in San Francisco, California, and and I was one of the first kind of CCS consultants. We had a small team at that point, but 16 years later, I was definitely one of the first ones. And I don't know, like, I was drawn to the fact that it was so dynamic, so challenging. It's such a hard job. And like, my eye, likes to wander. I get bored. If I'm not waking up every day learning, being productive, then I'm probably going to do something else. So the fact that consulting could be, this, DJ, 3 1-week IAs back to back to back in Canada. And then you get staffed on a year-long project, like for me in Alaska. And you're just like, what? I mean, that's a typical year in a consultant's life. You're in a different province in Canada, 3 weeks in a row with 3 different clients in 3 different industries, like, verticals. And then maybe you get staffed at some bank in Alaska and have to spend a winter up there. So like, I was drawn to that it was so dynamic, so refreshing, so new, always something to learn. Every client can be obviously great or your worst nightmare, right?
Yeah.
Some will give you space, some will look over your shoulder and want to see how they're spending every dime. I don't know. I thrive on that, the irony, thrive IT. I thrive on that though.
Yeah.
And that's what I think defines me, a little bit as a person is I want to wake up and I want to do something exciting and new and challenging every day.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So I guess the question that probably a lot of people will have is, how did you go from just, entry level person in consulting up to, and I don't know if the progression has always been the same. Citrix Consulting tended to have a staffing progression of that you were, staff, senior, principal, and then architect, typically the path. So how did your progression work?
So you kind of go staff, and I started at the bottom, right? In San Francisco, I was at the bottom. Yeah. So you start staff consultant, then I go senior principal, just as you said. And then once you hit principal, you get to split our career path, So we either become kind of an architect, a tech track, and there's a manager track. Right. And so you can become an SRM, SDM, that kind of thing. But I was, from day one, I knew I wanted to be an architect. I mean, the guys I were looking up to at that point were guys like Hector Lima, Scott Thompson. They were our first senior architects in CCS. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, Hector obviously is runs all of CS now. He's a senior vice president. Scott Thompson runs support like globally. And you look around Citrix and all the other, I think most of the VPs and executives are from CCS and formerly Innovex and Anderson Consulting or, Accenture. So I don't know, like I knew from day one, I guess I knew what I wanted to do. That's important because I still see people that they're at the principal level and they still don't know what they want to do. I've even seen people go to the manager level and they flop back to architect. So I've seen that, but I knew what I wanted to do. I think that was key. The second thing is I worked my freaking ass off. Excuse my language, but I knew going into Citrix, it was a kind of a performance, driven, rewarding culture. And so if I worked hard and I, traveled every week and worked 70 hours a week, so I did my day job, impressed the client, kind of satisfied all the requirements. And I started sharing and doing like blogging, writing lessons learned, getting active in the community, doing BriForum presentations, making sure that every single iForum Synergy Summit, I was on stage, right? Like I just, it's honestly, and Citrix rewards that. That's a great culture because it's not about like, you have to spend 3 years being a staff consultant doing, no, it's not like that. I was along the way, kind of trying to set new precedents too. Like, oh, no one's ever went from principal to architect in a year and a half. I'm going to break that. I can do it. And I'd lay out a plan, like, here's in 18 months what I'm going to do. And I would hit it, and then nobody can say anything. So I don't know. I think that was part of the strategy.
Nice. So, I mean, it is kind of amazing that there's room for everybody. I mean, this is something that I love about IT, honestly, is that there are room for the motivated and there's room for those that just want to be and just want to work, and it's okay to be either. And then there's room for that. But I think I do find, and you'll probably agree with me on this, is that in consulting anyway, there's like a runway kind of a thing, and if you don't take off, you're going to hit the end of the runway and it's just not going to work for you anymore, and it's kind of a weird metaphor considering the amount of travel that typically is involved with consulting. But there's a point where if you're not making an impression, then you're not really going to go anywhere. And if that's okay with you, then fine, but you have to own that. Just gave a talk yesterday, 2 days ago at the CUGC Northeast XL event about mentoring. And really, I think where that really solidified for me as a practice was at CCS. So let's talk a little bit about that, about just the mentoring culture and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and mentoring came from, again, our previous executives. All of our like practices, I think, is interesting at CCS. Came from Anderson, and like the guys, Tom Ekabachi, Fernando, Hector. A lot of those guys were, kind of ex-Anderson, Accenture consultants. And if you look at our initial, I don't know if you've ever seen these, but we have these PFFs or project feedback forms after every project. I remember looking at like the first Word doc and looking at the properties. This is like back in like 2004. And it says like Anderson and like Fernando Campos initials are on it. So it just goes to show you, like, that was something that started from, like probably the who's who of a professional services firm, right? They were the, one of the big boys, and, still are. But mentoring was something that was born day one. And like when I started, I was assigned a mentor, and I credit like my kind of leadership team, my mentors, along the way for, giving me good guidance and putting in a position where I could always succeed. So it's funny, just this, I don't know if you know this, but like just last month at Citrix, we rolled out this global kind of corporate mentoring program. So it's brand new. And I've been saying to people though for 15, 16 years, right? Like you don't need like, HR to tell you to go get a mentor. Like go find a mentor, somebody that can bounce ideas off of. It doesn't have to be in your department. Exactly. Like everyone's like, well, I need to look up and see, is there a senior architect in my department? No. I mentor people in EMEA. I mentor people in tech support. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Find somebody you can bounce some ideas off of. And I credit my mentors absolutely for, like I said, making sure that I could succeed.
Yeah, honestly. And that's true for me. I mean, between me coming in kind of totally green as far as that side of consulting, and working with our friend Andy on really honing that in. And it's funny, I see other people that have been with projects with me in consulting, and honestly, and what I said a couple of days ago is I'm going to actually shift this here so you can see, because I use my hands when I'm talking. But it's if two people have the same level of tech skills, what's going to make one go ahead? Well, it's got to be something else. It's got to be soft skills. It's got to be, relationships, got to be things like that. And so what happened with me is I said, okay, well, there's obviously some things I need to learn. If I just stayed prideful, I just stay at this level, but I wanted to go up. And so working, with Andy and some of the others, including yourself, Scott Campbell, and, a host of other people that I worked with to make sure that I was, listening and learning and being mentored as I was mentoring at the same time. It was just a game changer for the career as a general. It's just like, how could you not do that in these days? So how could you not be mentored?
And that's another big key differentiator, I think. And I wrote this article called like 5 lessons in 15 years of consulting or something like that on LinkedIn. And I think number 4 was like, soft skills. And it's something I don't know if I regret is the right word, but it's something when I look back at those, consulting years, like I wish I would have started branching out earlier and learning all those other, just how to be a better communicator, how to be a better presenter, how to be a better storyteller. I wish I would have picked up books on social psychology, for like just a long time ago, and started studying that stuff so I could read people better, so I could figure out, I don't know, different things about customer interactions. I started doing that stuff later on in my career, and that's another thing that you said, it's a differentiator. Like I feel like I have an edge, if I'm doing those things, because everybody can be a really smart, technical, depth type of architect, but do they have breadth? That's what always separates people. Like, do you know stuff outside of Citrix? That's why I started getting community and BriForum and all this, because like I wanted to learn how to architect a complete solution. So I think that technical breadth is key. And then I think the other thing is the soft skills, like you said. Like that's what makes a really well-rounded, kind of consultant, if you will.
Yeah.
It's not just technical depth. That's you got to know that stuff. If you're a senior consultant or something, right? Absolutely. Everybody's got to learn how to install a cloud connector, right? Or know the 1,000 group policy objects. Sure, that's important at a time. Sure. But as you kind of continue to grow, you got to add some breadth, and you got to have some non-technical skills.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, it's funny. Talking here, I'll put the better image on the screen here. But this book that I'm just completing on, it's on Kindle right now. I'm working on the printed editions as well. But that's a key thing in that. Is like, if you don't learn these soft skills, if you don't take the time and actually dive into this, then your career is absolutely going to stall. You're not going to really go anywhere. And like I said, if that's fine for you, that's fine for you. But don't expect things to be happening to you if you're not willing to put in the work and do that. It's just not going to work.
Right.
So,
and actually, another thing I forgot that I did earlier. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say we can talk about the rest of that article as I have it up on the screen, but go ahead.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, let's go there.
Well, so, and I put a link to this in the show notes. So the article we're talking about is something that Nick wrote on LinkedIn, and if I wasn't the first person to cheer it, I should have been. Just because it was like exactly me, like, okay, this is exactly what I've been trying to pound home for the last few years, is that, it's not just about the tech skills. So first was do your homework.
Yeah.
Second was CYA.
Prepare. Yep.
Yeah.
Cover your butt. Make sure you love it. Make sure you document. Make sure you love to document.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, and actually, gosh, how many stories could just you and I tell about how having the words written on the page have saved us from just, I'm just between projects that Nick and I worked on, I'm thinking of at least 5 clients that if we hadn't have said things on the page and written them down, then who knows what kind of trouble we would have been in, or what kind of trouble we would have gotten Citrix into if that wasn't the thing. And it's just such a simple little thing, just a literally like 10 minutes of work really can save.
Takes extra time, but it's part of the job, and it's absolutely critical. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the thing we all hate to do the most, but the thing we should absolutely be doing the most of. It's kind of funny. Yep. And that I skipped over the homework part. Maybe we should mention that part of it. Sometimes consultants get into a very transactional mindset of just, I'm in and out, which is true.
Yep.
But there's a lot of things, not only with your own company's culture, but the company you're serving as a consultant, that, if you don't do that, you're going to be stepping into a situation where you're not going to feel like a very valuable person to them if you don't do the homework and let them know. Or maybe not let them know, but, just sound like what you're talking about when it comes to their company, and that you have their best interest at heart. And you mentioned a few tips here about, using a home lab and, working on the plane, that sort of thing, instead of just slacking off, that sort of thing. It's like, it shows a level of focus that's really important.
Yeah, and like, it's, again, not one of those fun things, but like every Sunday night, if I was going to wake up and, fly somewhere Monday at 6 a.m. to a new customer, I wanted to spend an hour Sunday night. It doesn't take a lot, but it is, can be, annoying when you have family and stuff like that. But like, I'd spend Sunday night doing my homework. I would if they're a public company, like I would download a transcript of their last earnings call, so I knew like what topical kind of issues maybe they're going through, where they stood at financially. I would research a couple of the client, like if I had some names, obviously at that point, I would research a couple of client people on LinkedIn, see where they've been. Maybe I knew them. Like all those little things help you get an edge. And it's so important in consulting. Like, so you step in, you walk in that first meeting when doing a project kickoff, like you need to know what the heck's going on. You need to be informed. They're paying you the big bucks, not so you can go and learn as you're on site. They expect you to be the trusted advisor from day one, minute one. So yeah, that was big for me.
Yeah, and I think that speaks well to things that I bring up every now and then too, and remind people that it's easy for people in technology to get stuck on just the doing of technology, and thinking that the customer knows what they're talking about. I mean, that's kind of, actually, I think, Nick, you were the first person at CCS that I was talking to that actually gave me permission to stand my ground and say, look, you're asking me to do this, but you don't know what the bleep you're talking about. It's like, we need to go back to your business needs and say, okay, this is what's going on with the business. And if we don't address that, then we're just making another solution that you're going to, be upset with in 6 months anyway. And so, it's important to do that.
I mean, they're not paying you the big bucks to agree with them. They're paying you the big bucks to tell them what to do and make the right choice for their business, given their unique business requirements and unique considerations and constraints. And this is why I've always said too, like there's best practices and then there's reality. Everyone's always like, well, the best practice, Nick, is to do this. And it's like, yeah, that's the best practice 80% of the time. But for this client, that has these unique constraints, and maybe they ranked their business priorities differently than you did or the other 80%, the best practice is different. And that's okay. It's okay to be different and, like go against the grain, like stand up for yourself, do what's right for the customer, that's okay. Yeah. Challenge old ways of thinking. Who cares?
Yeah. And honestly, I think that was something that came into play. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say the name of the client that you and I were working with, but it was a real head scratcher for Nick and I when the engineer at the company, started telling us what best practices were because of a blog article that was written. Well, that particular blog article, it wasn't even a blog article, it was a documentation, I believe it was. And we had to spend like 2 hours explaining to them how just because this is the kind of the usual doesn't mean it works in your situation.
Yeah. And what's really funny about that is like, that's happened to me a number of times. And sometimes they don't know, like the client didn't know at the time that maybe I wrote the article.
Yeah.
And so like, I'll literally be like, yeah, that is what I said. And I'm like, number one, do you know I wrote that? And they're like, no. And they're like, number two, I'm like, it's okay. Like, like I wrote that. Yeah. And I'm saying something different. Here's why. Yeah. But here's the other thing, like, and I've always just tried to, preach to every single new hire at Citrix that comes through is like, it's okay to say it depends. That's the classic consulting answer, but you better freaking know what it depends on. Yeah. And you better be able to back it up with A, B, and C, because the customer is going to question you like that. Well, you said it was this, or it depends because of this. But you say, yeah, I made this decision because of, 1, 2, and 3. So I think that's really, really important. Just don't do the cop out things like it depends. It's the consulting answer and laugh it off. Make sure you know what it depends on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And this year has been unique for me. This is the first year I can say that a client was asking me what the leading practice was, and I literally got to throw the book at them. On that one. But interestingly enough, the topic was about single server scalability and what the best practices were. And I was like, no, we're not about best practices here. We're about the best work. And for you to get the best, you have to just see that as a starting point, which I mean, I think if I remember correctly, in what year was that? 2011. Nick wrote an article that kind of defined best practice for server scalability. I'm trying to remember what year that was. It was
somewhere on there, 2012, 13.
Yeah. And that was kind of key because it gets people out of the white paper mode. But it's amazing to see even that became like rote.
Right. And that's what happens, that's okay. And once you have a voice out there, people are going to say, DJ said this, Nick said that, and it's the Bible or gospel. But you can always point back and say it's a blog. It's informal. And I think maybe that's
even if the blog post starts off with explaining what best practices or leading practices actually are, it's kind of funny how people skip over things. But I think another thing that's really kind of critical here is to note that if you're not a consultant, if you're just working for a company, and hey, Bad Wolf, how you doing? If you're just working for a company and you need to defend a position, especially if it's going against, or what you might perceive as against a blog article, that's where the community comes in. That's where the community comes in to be able to help you form that argument, if you will, to be able to say, okay, yes, the article says this in this circumstance. We have this circumstance and this need, therefore we need to do things this way. And it's tough for people to hear that sometimes, but it's positively crucial that you understand that it's you got to defend the positions here. And I think nice. I do believe that either my connection or Nick's connection might have frozen up here. So I'm just going to keep talking and hope that that recovers. So, yeah, as far as that goes, while we wait for Nick to come back here, soft skills play into that as far as being used to doing things that are outside of the technology and really getting to the point where you are Do-do.
Better.
And back. There we go.
Little technical glitch there. Not sure what happened, but it just froze.
Yeah, this is kind of the world we're living in these days.
Where were we?
There's always grace, but yeah, we were talking about if you're working for a company and then you get the best practices are challenged. That's why we started saying leading practices instead of best practices, because
it's funny leading. So that changed, somewhere along the way there, but it's actually because of our Citrix legal team. We actually got in some hot water, I think, with calling it best, because best has a legal kind of, connotation, ramification. And sometimes in really rare circumstances, we actually will get pulled into court to like settle something. And best had been used kind of against us. And so we changed it to leading practices somewhere along the way because of that. So it's pretty funny, but that's the story.
Interestingly enough, though, I think it's better.
Yeah. And it's more, right. And it gives us more leeway to say like, well, that's the leading practice for, these scenarios, but there's, other leading practices for these scenarios. So like, I kind of agree, because best is like, it's the be all end all best. That's not true.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times people forget that end user computing is a very, very dynamic enterprise as far as that goes. Yeah. It's not like what works for one will work for two. It just doesn't work that way. There's too many systems, too many other things involved. The workloads are different, everything like that. But so what you did a few years later is took all the frustrations that a lot of us were having and came up with just a baseline rule for scalability. And I think that was kind of an interesting process of how that was developed, of watching people try and overcomplicate things and just say, okay, wait, what we're seeing as a trend is this. It tends to hold pretty well. Why don't you just start here?
Yeah, I got so sick of answering questions about triple S, the single server scalability, and then hardware sizing. What do I buy, Nick? I mean, how many users can I get on a box? If I didn't dime for every time I was asked that, I would be a very rich retired man. So I think after answering it 10, 15 times, I said, you know what? CPU is the bottleneck like 99% of the time, at least for our kind of classic XenApp and desktop workloads. Yep. And like I'm seeing some kind of themes develop around number of cores, or physical cores. So I was like, I'll call it the rule of 5 and 10. It's close. I think at the time it was like rule of 5 and 9, but it didn't roll off the tongue. So I just said, we'll make it the rule of 5 and 10. If you have and literally you base it off of one thing, the number of physical cores in the box. Forget hyper threading, I have two CPUs for this VDI workload. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And I still get questions about that. Oh, my clock speed's this. It's okay, just be quiet for 1 second. Take the number of physical cores in the box, times it by either 5 or 10. That's your expected, triple S or density. Done. Yeah. If you want, and then I'm like, by the way, that gets you like kind of, I usually within like an 80%, kind of ratio or percentile.
Take it from there, yeah.
Yeah, and if you want it, and if you want the exact number for your unique workload and environment and hardware, great. There's tools like Log and VSI that do a fantastic job at literally pinpointing and giving you your magic number. But if you want to do it quick and dirty on the back of a napkin, rule of 5 and 10. So yeah, once I kind of documented that, my life became a little easier.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing is what I say to people is like, look, for you to know exactly what it is, if you know that, you're going to always be expected to know that. You're putting that expectation on yourself. But if management comes up to you right now and says, we're adding 400 people, what do we need? Yep. For you to be able to say quick math in my head, okay, we need this many servers, configured like this, and these licenses, go. Yeah. That's what management wants to hear.
Yeah. And the other reason I can tell you, like, being in consultant, I started this EA role, this enterprise architect role. And it's kind of where we started branching out and doing a little bit more pre-sales. So we started tagging. It was like an experiment at first, like tag along with a sales rep, see if you can add some value. And of course, I think having that post-sales experience, we immediately added value to these pre-sales conversations that were maybe on the borderline, right? Like close, but they needed to like a push over the edge. And so we could tell them like what the 5 things they're about to run into is, right? If they implement this, we could tell them maybe what their competitor, who remain nameless, is doing. Like those things are priceless to a customer who's maybe, teetering on the edge, making a big decision. But anyways, I started doing more pre-sales. And when we get in these, like, the cart before the horse things, when I mean like, well, we need to buy hardware, but we need to figure out, do testing for our workload before we can buy hardware. And like, but we need to budget, before we buy hardware. It's like, so you get in this like, chicken and egg kind of thing. And that's where I was almost forced to develop these rules of like, whether it's log on times or single server scalability, just so I could give a quick estimate so we could push a project forward. So a customer can make a budgeting decision like that instead of doing that paralysis analysis, churn and, endless cycle, because that can take 6 months in an enterprise customer. And literally we would come to the same answer as if I did the back of the napkin math and told them, you probably need 420 servers and you'll be fine. Like that's what it came down to. So, that's the issue.
And honestly, people forget too that, this is IT, this is, end user computing. These are things that are very, very dynamic as far as, well, especially in the enterprise, because you have so much, churn and burn and, all these kind of things that happen with employees. You have different work days that have more workloads than others and that sort of thing. So the answer
is easy to get stuck and hung up, right? And do that paralysis analysis. It's very easy. See it all the time still.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of funny. I do remember the first time that this really got challenged and I had to explain it to someone. And that you see that aha moment, it was actually I was in Duluth, Minnesota in February. Not great, but having to explain that to them is like, okay, look, we could be here all week and not really get it. And that is, by the way, folks, this is another soft skill that's actually really crucial, not only for consulting, but within an organization. You need to be a trusted advisor within your organization. You need to be able to explain things in a way that can make sense. So if it's something where they're trying to get the minutia of, how many, what speed does my processor need to be and all these kind of things, it's like, okay, well, we can go down that road, but if we're within 80%, is it really going to be worth it to?
And I'm a big 80-20 guy, and I think these days too, how like my roles evolved, and now I'm doing kind of more customer success, which is basically the EA. I'm leading the EA team still, but over a broader like big C. So now we do pre-sales, tech support, customer success. We do more than just consulting and education and CMS. It's important to like be able to make quick decisions and move the speed of sales. Because if you're not moving the speed of sales, like you're not going to be asked for your opinion, right? And so like, we've had to take more. I'm always urging my EAs to like take more calculated risks. Like it's okay to stick your neck out there. And so part of like creating those rules, or that it's all about that. It's like so you can make some quick decisions and make sure you're keeping up with the speed of sales and how fast our customers in this EUC world is moving, because it's fast, as you know.
Really fast, yeah. And honestly, competitiveness has become a whole different animal in the last 2-3 years. It isn't really even about who has the best toys anymore. It really is the overall experience, which number 3 on your blog post is follow-up. And I think that actually is one of the biggest things that I'm seeing as differentiating people right now is it's not just the technology, it's how your people are approaching it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, follow up, follow through, whatever you want to call it. It's so important. And something that was instilled for me, like in my new hire training, day one, from some of the best consultants ever, right? The Al Monserrats and Fernando Campo. I think Fernando was the one that told me, he was our own old SVP of sales for 10 years. I love that guy. Also a Tulane graduate. So part of the reason why I'm here. But Fernando had this thing where it's like, if someone calls you or emails you, you respond or you call them back within 48 hours. And like in consulting, I think that's, we take that and we accelerate that even more, the timeline. So if a client emails you, or they ask you a question right there, it's okay to say, I don't know, because a lot of times you don't. Nobody knows everything. That's one of the, I think another big important thing, right, is saying I don't know and being okay with that. But here's the key. I tell all these new hires, you better follow up. You say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. You get back to them. That follow up and follow through, that's what's going to keep a customer for life, right? Yep. They appreciate that. It goes a long way. Or picking up the phone and calling someone back to leave you a voicemail. I know you're busy. I know you're tired after that project on Thursday night, but do it. Spend the extra 5 minutes and do it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, that's something that I will say from my career standpoint, that mentality shift was another big leap forward for me of saying, you know what, the reality is they could have given that money to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, there's be that sense of value. And even though like they're not paying me directly, you know, even though they're paying like Citrix or whatever company I'm working with, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be the one to add value.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to it, if there's, you know, 2-3 candidates that they're looking at for the next job, they're going to see the list is like, well,
yeah,
DJ followed up.
Yep.
I'm going to give him a call.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the intangibles, right? Like, and just like you said, competitive. So like we get in these bake-offs and competitive situations, you know, with our friends over at VMware or F5, right? And, you know, the couple that everyone always, you know, we run into the most. But like a lot of times it's not because of some technical bell or whistle that is going to like sell it. It's all the other stuff. It's how your technical support team, you know, responds and follow-ups, for example. It's maybe a sales rep that followed up, like you said. You know, it's maybe just a relationship. That's why it's so important to make a good impression, you know, follow up, follow through, be thorough, document, all those things we're talking about. They all add up, and it's not going to be the technology that's going to probably win you a deal. It's every other thing.
Yeah. And then also even within a company where you're just working as an employee, you know, whether it's an engineer or, you know, even administrator or whatever, you know, that is really important as well. And so when you get a mountain of tasks, you know, make sure that you have following up on something as something that comes up often so you can remember to do it. It's actually important. So that's one of the reasons why I use a paper planner these days is not only to take notes because writing helps solidify things in the brain, but also writing out the same task a bunch of times. It gets to the point where you're like, I've got to stop writing this task. I've got to actually do it.
Do it or automate it is what I was going to say. Yeah. Right. And that's like
automate or even delegate at times too. But if it's a follow-up task, you know, move that up the list, make it a thing. And that actually is a big differentiator. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to soft skills, there's a paragraph in this article, because you and I get this question all the time, like, what should I do for certifications? And my answer is always the same. It's like, look, certifications are rarely for you. You know, they're for who you're working for. So whatever they need, do that. But this myth that you need a certification to get a job is ludicrous.
It's like one of those things. Yeah, it's a checkbox sometimes, right? If you need to get a job or something, and we go through that, or, you know, and like other times I'll say it's for like some of our younger junior consultants. You know, it's good. It kind of forces them to go through the process and do the basics and stuff like that, and make sure they have a lab and they can lab stuff up. Okay, great. But after I'm saying like 5 years, you know, experience, it's all about experience. No one cares about the letters behind your name. They just, you know, they want to know if you can kind of get the job done, right? And these days I'd rather read a book or focus on soft skills. Like I said, learning some stuff outside of your comfort zone in IT or the tech world. That's, I think, you know, just as important or more important these days.
Yeah, there's a great book on this. Actually, 2 books, and one you mentioned is the concept of emotional intelligence, and that, you know, there's more to this than just, you know, the tech. You know, we're people. They're involved with other people. We need to recognize those dynamics, and more valuable it can be in that regards. But Extreme Ownership was another book that just really rocked my world. As far as that concept of, well, it was a lot of like cheering on moments for me. It was like, yes, this is something that's been really definitive for me of saying, you know, the times where I've taken ownership of a problem and finding that. Okay. So a lot of times we tend to think that I have been assigned a task. That means I have to do the task, or I have a question. That means I have to find the answer. And that's just BS. That's just not true. What they want is for you to take responsibility for getting it done, not for you being the one to do it. And
you got to remember too, there's a bunch of different ways to solve a problem or skin a cat, right? Like that, you know, like it's true. You it's not one size
Yeah.
fits all, and you don't got to be a drone and put your head down and do it this way because you're expected to do it that way. Like, it's okay. That's why I think that when I did this course at Stanford, I think it was last year, it was like some leadership, like an exec program, like leadership type of thing. And like, we got to go to the D school or design school, which is just all these, Stanford brainiac, PhD and master students studying like design stuff. And it's just fascinating, because it's a different, it's like for me, I'm techie and I'm, pretty left brained, and I always kind of solve tasks or approach problems the same way. What they're doing there is literally tricking your brain and teaching you how to maybe think about a problem differently. Yeah. That to me was fascinating and like opened my eyes up to like, wow, I could have been doing this way, or maybe I should have done this, or I don't know, cool stuff like that. I'm very fascinated by now,
Yeah, it's just, and this stuff can become a lot of fun to shift your focus. I mean, especially if you're a consultant, you're not the kind of person who is going to want to sit in a cubicle all the time.
Yep.
Some people really like that stability and that sense of belonging that comes in being part of a company. But for either one, if you can do things that are outside of the norm, that you're going to benefit from that. And so,
and what you made me think about, like, it's a mindset, right? Like, for me, that life at IBM and sitting in a cubicle, that wasn't for me.
Right.
But like, consulting also is not for a lot of people. Like the average consultant or person in professional services, especially like a management consulting firm, it's under 3 years, the life expectancy, 2.78, whatever it is. It always hovers around there. It's because it's a grind, dude. It's hard. No one likes to be on the road 50 weeks out of the year. Like, I get it. I went through it. Mm-hmm. But if you have the right mindset and like go into every part, like I love travel and I get to go to, British Columbia this week for, and like in the snow and like get to learn about all the different food and like, culture. And I can talk to a client that's in this industry and learn a ton from them. That's like the mindset you need to survive. Yeah. Because if you have a mindset like, oh, I got to get on a plane again, I got to leave my family again, this is a grind, you're not going to last. And you're going to be out of here in 2 years. And CCS is no different. I see it, we see it all the time. I think CCS, our life expectancy is maybe another year or so on top of that, but most people last 3, 4, 5 years and they're doing something else.
Yeah. So that runway runs out and it's just like, okay, that's
But if you have the right mindset, you can break through. Like you said, that 3 to 5 year barrier is kind of what I think it is for CCS. And you make it on the other side, then you can start to, take your career in different directions, right? You can be a business kind of development manager. Maybe you want to be a senior architect and be an enterprise architect and do more pre-sales. Like there's the doors open wide, but you gotta, get through that kind of, barrier of 3 to 5 years and travel and work like hell and, and have a positive mindset about it. That's the key.
And that's something really key too, because I think there's 3 major keys outside of learning the technology that I've been noticing and I've been starting to talk more and more about. One, obviously, is methodology. You want to have a good method to what you're doing, those soft skills. The other is finding a mentor, getting mentored and being a mentor. And the other one is mindset. It really is like, if you don't have it clear up here while you're doing something and connected with that, then you're going to be miserable. And actually, this brings me to the last thing I wanted to talk about, and that is how important it is to be yourself. Yeah. And whenever I think of Nick, there's a word that we describe Nick often, and that word is nitro.
Yes. Yep. And that's, that's something. So nitro, maybe I'll explain that first. The nickname. So it was like our first status meeting out in California. And we went around the room and, you basically in these regional status meetings, you share kind of what project you were on and, what you did that week, what you learned that week, one thing really quick. And we went around the room that time and decided to pick everyone had to pick a different American Gladiator. And that was like, you might remember this, DJ, but that was one of my favorite shows growing up, right? Where they're doing the obstacle course at the end and they're dodging everything. But all the names were crazy, right? Laser and Glazer. And, but my name was Nitro. And I used to have a lot of, great hair back then. And so that was part of it. As I look at you here, DJ, I'm so jealous.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But like I chose Nitro. And of course, after that, life went on. But the only name that stuck out of the 10 people I think in that room was mine. And the reason why is I think it's because I talk fast. I like to work fast. And, So it kind of stuck, but it's from the American Gladiators and like from my literally like my first regional status meeting 16 years ago at Citrix.
Yeah.
But back to being yourself, like, I embrace the nitro, I'm always kind of, my mind is running rampant and sometimes I can't get the words out, right? That's going on in my head. So the nitro thing works and I've embraced that. But the other thing is like doing those things like BriForum, for example, getting involved in community, like I just wanted to be myself, like on stage and like keep it real. I'm a big believer in transparency, like, just keep it real, tell it how it is. Like, I think one of the biggest things we can do is like be authentic and share like real lessons learned from in the trenches. Like it's going to save somebody time, and so like just be real, keep it exciting, authentic. And I think you're going to be a lot better off as opposed to like being a robot up there and speaking in a monotone voice. Like nobody wants to be PowerPointed to death, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's true at customers too.
Yeah. And like I'd rather tell the customer like what, I always say like put yourself in the customer's shoes. Right. Tell them like if you're that customer, would you buy this? Would you do this and make that decision? And sometimes the answer is going to be no. Like don't do this. And the customer, luckily I'm in the position of where I don't have a, well, kind of do, but like I don't have a quarterly quota, to retire. So,
right.
But I'm in the business of keeping customers for life. I'm not in the business of keeping a customer for 90 days. Like, so I don't know. And that's the mindset we all need to have, especially in this new kind of cloud computing subscription-based world. It's all about, annual recurring revenue. The keyword there is recurring.
Yep.
If you're not keeping customers for life and renewing contracts, you're dead in this world. So I'm trying to, tell everybody and preach everybody these days that like, we're in the business of keeping customers for life, not the next 90 days or 2 quarters. Like that's BS.
Yeah. And it really does mean that you have to be a firm advocate, where you're for the customer, even if they don't know what they're for.
Yep. You have to really understand their business requirements, get in their head, understand their priorities, what they're doing inside and outside of IT, because ultimately you're helping them kind of figure out the best place to spend their money and like, where's the best place to invest their time and resources. They're precious, especially right now in kind of this COVID era, precious time, money, resources.
Yes.
There's not a lot to go around. So we got to make sure that we're making the right decision for that customer every time. And I think the best way to do that is like by being authentic, keeping it real, telling them how you'd spend your own money, right? If you were in their shoes.
Absolutely. And really it comes down to, this is true regardless of how you're serving right now. I mean, there's 2 key things that I think are important for people to remember. And that's that one, we're talking about IT services. Services is a very key word. The other thing we're talking about when it comes to information technology is the word solution is usually used for that. This is a solution. Right. If there's a solution, that means there's a problem you're trying to solve. It's not just a toy here. This is a serious business tool that you're trying to get across. And so in consulting, it's really important that you're keeping that in mind, but I think that's equally important if you are in a just serving within a company. The company you're serving is your customer.
Yeah.
And you need to get that mindset.
That's a great point. I mean, as soon as you start talking products and features, you're in trouble, right? We always want to be talking solutions, but in the key, I think you hit on this earlier, but tying those solutions back to real business challenges, like that is key. And when you make a design decision, I always, when I do a lot of document QAs, right, and I hammer our consultants because they'll say, here's the design decision. I say, that you told me nothing. That design decision, you need to tell me you made that decision because you tied it back to business requirement number 2 and 4. Otherwise, that's why it's so important to document those kind of requirements or priorities up front. But if you don't do that, how are you tying back any of these design decisions or solutions to real business challenges or priorities? Like, so that's something I'm big on. I think you hit it on the head,
Yeah. And honestly, this is something that I've vetted in multiple organizations, multiple scenarios, but it's why the first stage of my methodology, I call it understand.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other ways to say it, assess and things like that. But in my mind, the goal, understand what's going on. Yeah. If you don't have that, you will fail. And I guarantee it. It may not be at the end of this project, but down the road a year, if you don't fully understand the true business reasons for something like this, or they can be even psychological reasons, whatever they are. If you don't understand the motivations of a project or a need, you might as well just stop and just go home.
Yeah,
You know?
it's funny. We changed you probably remember our old methodology. At first there was like, analysis, design,
Yeah.
roll out, the cheese wheel, I called it. Then we went to assess, design, deploy. I think that's where you're
Yep.
referencing assess. But then I think the latest one, our first word in there is define. So you hit it on the head. We thought we needed to do more work up front, like in the pre-sales process, to understand like their business requirements. And so that's what we do. We define business and technical requirements before we get into the assessment or analysis, phase. So anyways, we kind of reworked our own methodology because I think, and that's normal. That's fine, right? It's like we're reworking a best practice. Like that methodology worked for a period in time, but as we evolved as a business, our customers evolved, we had to evolve our methodology and framework. That's cool. But anyways, that's something we added just maybe like 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that. And one of the key conversation points that gosh, the word that keeps coming up that we keep having to explain is the word iterative.
Yes,
it means that this is a cycle. This doesn't ever end. Just because you got to the end of a project doesn't mean that's where you just let it go. And this is something where there's a challenge with this, just to full disclosure, that is an increasing trend. It's the agile, release methodology. That if you are in IT services, if you adopt that methodology, you will not have a customer next year, is the way I put this. It's like, look, I hate to be so crass about it, but if you are working in a release kind of mindset, you're not going to have a customer next year. You need to always come back to understand and always come back to that process.
Yep, couldn't agree more. It's not a straight line. And nothing is finite about it, like our methodology. We actually added manage, another word, at the end of ours, because that manage is like a steady state. It's an iterative process. It means optimization. It's all, now we have Citrix Managed Services. That's there for a reason, because once you just do the rollout, you don't go, all right, guys, enjoy your Citrix deployment for the next 10 years. Like, it doesn't work like that. Right away, you have to be planning for the next use case, maybe. Right away, you got to be, planning for the next business requirement that might come in. Like, there's always ways to optimize an environment, right, DJ? Like, always you should be tuning and tweaking. So, it never stops. Iterative process. Good point.
No, it doesn't. And then actually, what I'm finding, and I'm starting to figure out how to put this into a work, maybe end of this year, 2021, is how to start applying a methodology like that in multiple different ways. I applied this methodology to a sales team, and we saw not only the alignment with consulting projects, but just the overall sales go way up. So we just, let's understand what the customer needs. Let's, change what they're doing today. And then let's, I set my own thing. So you understand, then you really want to get to the point of what we typically call design, or I call plan. So once you have a plan, then you put that into action with change. And a lot of times that's just something as simple as just buying a software and implementing it, that sort of thing. And then getting to that point of maintaining, which is relationship, which is watching for things to vary from that kind of steady state, I guess you could say, and saying, so it works.
Proactive monitoring. Right. Yep.
But I think there's times we can do this in other things too. Like even within our career, we can kind of apply that mentality to it of saying, have I really taken the time to stop and understand what I want or what my options are, and actually have a career plan? This is kind of, I spent so many years of my life without any kind of real career plan. What I did was I'd set one that was time keyed, but it was a little bit time keyed in the wrong way. Back in, I'm going to say 2009, I said to myself, okay, I want to be a Citrix architect in 5 years.
Yeah.
And when that became a reality within a year and a half, I didn't know what to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah. No, I was the same way. I can relate. I mean, my career plan was always to be the next kind of Hector Lima, Scott Thompson, Dan Allen, all these kind of senior architects I looked up to. I wanted to be that guy. But then I got there in, I don't know, 6-7 years, whatever it took. I was like, what do I do now? Yeah. And so I reassessed, and I was like, man, I really should probably I think that like one of the hard problems to solve, and we're getting a lot of value out of these EAs, is like, maybe I can start building more EAs. And so I started trying to solve that impossible problem of, building, hiring, retaining top technical talent. And I actually transformed from an individual contributor to a people manager and led this EA team for several years. And that was really rewarding, and a whole new skill set I needed to learn, right? How to, deal with, managing people's problems, and, whether it's work or personal, there's a lot of stuff there, right?
Yeah.
And then lately, like my title for the last, I don't know, several years, 4 or 5 years, was principal architect. I intentionally, and it's an intentional thing, I changed it to senior director. And it's because I wanted to learn more about the business. I wanted to learn more about what we're doing in this kind of new subscription world. I wanted to learn more about customer success, value engineering. Like, these are new hot skills that I think are going to be the future. And so that's an intentional move, moving from IC to a people manager, moving from kind of a consulting to more of a customer success role. These are very intentional moves that, kind of based on this iterative career plan.
It's honestly, and we could probably call it that kind of thing. And but if you don't have a plan, if you don't have that kind of intentionality, you're just going to end up with whatever they give you.
Yeah, you're right. You're going to end up as a field architect working projects, doing, that's fine. We need those people too. That's fine. But if you want to constantly maybe be, maybe evolving and growing there, don't be afraid to get out of that comfort zone and try something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm finding too that the more that I do share things myself, the more I see others sharing or encouraging others to share not just what they know, but just in terms of like encouraging others and kind of having a different mindset, and encouraging that mindset in others. Those are the people that I'm finding are really automatically looked up to.